Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dedrick Russell, and what we're doing here at WBTV, in case you did not know, there is an election going on. Early voting is happening right now, and then there's a primary on September 9th where you get a chance to vote on who you want to represent you in Charlotte City government. And today we have Brendan Maginnis. He is running to be mayor. He wants to call things at City Hall, and so right now we're going to have a one-on-one conversation with Mr. Maginnis. How you doing today?
Good, good. Labor Day weekend coming up. I'm sure everybody's got a lot of plans and barbecues and stuff like that. Hopefully they'll watch us at their barbecue or their picnic or whatever else and hear about the mayoral race and me in particular.
Gotcha. Well, tell us, who is Brendan Maginnis?
Good question. I'm a former Marine, former financial advisor, built up my financial planning practice from the ground up. So I know what hard work is. I think that gives me a different perspective when it comes to problem solving. What I want to do is not just put a Band-Aid over things, not just treat the effect, but actually start treating the cause. So growing up, I'm not from Charlotte, but I have spent most of my life here in Charlotte. And if you know, I've been in Charlotte for a long time. We've got the same Charlotte problems, the same Charlotte solutions. I bring innovative solutions to this. Just as far as on a personal note, you know, a lot of times when I go into Democratic spaces now, I have to visually state, I am a Democrat. And so just to let you know, I am a Democratic candidate. I've been a Democrat since Clinton growing up. You know, he was one of my inspirations out of high school for that. And so, you know, going in high school, my parents actually worked 4 jobs to put us through school. My mother is a devout Catholic. They want us to have a Catholic education, my sister and I. So they worked 4 jobs, you know, 2 apiece. One of those jobs was my father working in a convenience store, midnight shift on the weekends. And one of the things he taught me was you make more money with your head than with your hands. And I've always taken that as advice. And so, you know, people have told me, hey, don't wear a tie, look more, you know, look more casual. When you walk into a room like that, you know, the white guy with the tie, you know how you look. But I wear the tie, I'm proud to wear the tie because it's a symbol of my father's goals, his dreams for me, all the work that he put forward to it. So I wear a tie because it means something to me, and I hope everybody takes that same initiative and is able to fulfill their father's legacy of being able to wear a tie if that's what they want to do.
And so why do you want to become Charlotte mayor? Did you have an epiphany, or what happened to say, hey, I want to be the next mayor of Charlotte?
I guess the epiphany was Victoria, Councilman Watlington coming out and saying that there's a scandal or there's corruption in Charlotte government. You know, we've sat over the last couple of years and seen Charlotte scandals, whether it's the Bank of America upgrades, not getting enough public input, the dismissal of Patrick Baker, the Jennings settlement, which is the big thing that's going on. You know, I think she kind of pulled back the curtain by saying that. I think she's a very smart person, smarter than me. And I said, wow, you know, someone's finally coming in and talking about this. And then media covered a little bit and then it died down. And so I sat there and said, okay, well, elections are coming up. Somebody's going to step up. And no one did. And really, quite honestly, that was disappointing. If there was a council member who decided they wanted to run for this position, I probably wouldn't be here today. But they didn't. And I think that goes to a problem with the Democratic Party right now is we're looking for fighters, we're looking for people who take that initiative, do those things, and nobody did for our civic leaders. So, you know, you had Jennifer Roberts come out and say, we need choices. And I heard that, and when she decided not to run, I said, I'll do that. I've run before. I was actually the candidate, Democratic candidate in the North Carolina 14th District, U.S. House, in 2024. I got the endorsement of the Charlotte Observer, Black Pillow Caucus at that point in time. So I, you know, had the know-how, had the grassroots organization to do that. And so again, when she said, you know, when she backed up, being a former Marine, there is a saying that we have, which is lead, follow, or get the heck out of the way, right? And I take that to heart. I'm more than willing to follow somebody if there's leadership. I'm more than willing to get the heck out of the way if I can't be part of the solution. But I'm going to step up and fill that leadership void when there is a void. And there definitely is a void right now in terms of the city. Once you start diving into the problems, you just really start to understand the depth of what's going on, the issues that we're facing, and we don't hear a lot about it. Something like affordable housing, we talk about affordable housing being an issue, but we really never talk about how bad that issue really is.
So what is your solution to tackle homelessness and affordable housing. What's your solution?
Well, those are two separate
Right.
things. I will say that. As affordable housing, it's a matter of bringing in. I think this reflects how my plan is. I respect the mayor for what she's done over the last 8 years, and the city council that she worked with. They put in some good initiatives in place, and so what I always want to do is take some of those initiatives that have been working, expand them. So when you talk about affordable housing, the HTF, the Housing Trust Fund, which has been in place for 20 plus years. CHOIF, Charlotte Housing Opportunity Investment Fund, expanding that as well. So expanding those, but bringing new innovative solutions. We sit there and we talk about there's competition in the marketplace right now as far as affordable housing or housing in general. But if the builders, traditional builders, are doing the same thing, that's not really competition. You know, you look at something like big oil, that's not competition, that's a conglomerate. It's the same things going on in Charlotte. So what we want to do is we want to bring in innovative solutions, new ways to build, increase supply, and therefore drop down prices. So things like 3D printing is one of the things we looked at. 3D printing, modular homes, micro units. We have micro units here in Charlotte. We can do more of those. Modular homes, we can do those in North Carolina. 3D printing, Littleton, North Carolina, outside of Raleigh, there's a development going on. Everybody knows Habitat for Humanity. They've built several houses up in Virginia through 3D printing. And so when you talk about 3D printing, they can build a 1,000 square foot house in 24 hours at a cost of $30,000. Now they've got to build the roof and the usual things, but what we're talking about here is we're able to build a house at 30% less cost, 20% less build time, so you're getting more houses on the market at a lower rate. And then what that's going to do is not only is going to offer more houses at an affordable rate for everybody, but then you're going to force those builders to reduce their prices as well to compete. So you get affordable housing all across the board, not just those individual houses.
So why don't you think that's happening right now?
I think it's, when we talk about a will versus a way, I think there's not the will there. We've been in some forums and people say Dillon rule, which basically what it means is the city only has the powers that's vested in them by the North Carolina legislature. And so when you talk about a Dillon rule, what they've been using that for is to say, we can't do that here because the legislature won't let us. But these things are already approved in North Carolina, being utilized right now in North Carolina. I think what it comes down to is the fact that it's not a secret. I think there's a lot of money going into campaigns from developers. So there's a lack of desire to bring in new competition. And so I think that's what it comes down to. It's just, again, it goes back to the whole Charlotte problems, Charlotte solutions. We're not looking at new solutions. That's why someone like me fits in, because I'm going to come here, I'm going to have a blank slate, I'm going to look at innovative solutions and make them work here in Charlotte.
And one question that was brought to us is that what can you do if elected as mayor to make sure that that we feel the love from Raleigh lawmakers, because they call us the big great Mecklenburg County. So what can you do to make sure that we can feel the love between our Raleigh lawmakers and here in Charlotte?
Sure. I don't think there's much of a difference between Raleigh lawmakers and the CEOs and chief executive officers we work with here in Charlotte when you talk about Bank of America, Honeywell. They all understand business. I come from a business background. I think that's what distinguishes me from the current mayor and the other candidates and most of the other city council at the same time too. I come from a business background, so I always want to look at things as a business way. How can we do things to make sure that business is working, but it's going to help the community at the same time too? So you go into whether it's the North Carolina legislature or the the CEO, the boardrooms uptown, you can't go in there and with them say, what's best for us is best for Charlotte. You have to convince them and help them understand that what's best for Charlotte is best for them. And so again, when you talk about legislature, one of my plans is to pedestrianize uptown. That's part of my job creation plan. We have festivals there all the time. Studies show that if you pedestrianize center cities, it increases tourism dollars by 40%. So when we talk about in tourism, it too is one of those industries that most jobs associated with it don't require a college degree, and that's what we don't have here in Charlotte. We don't have that industry that's building those jobs for non-degree holders. So you pedestrianize uptown. Now you're creating jobs for people without degrees, specifically the underserved areas around uptown. Okay. Then you start having a transit system make sense, because now the transit system is feeding workers into the center city where there are jobs. And then part of my plan as far as transit is actually extending the blue line to Carowinds. And the reason why you do that is you're creating a synergy between Carowinds and Uptown. You're creating more tourism. And then when you start talking money and how profitable it is, how that makes ridership go up, ridership is going to create safety because we're going to actually put police officers on there. We don't get stabbings on South Boulevard or the South Line. You start getting those synergies. We can start doing private-public partnerships because Carowinds is going to want that at the same time too. And that's how you get funding. That's how you convince the North Carolina General Assembly to buy in. Is you tell them this is going to be profitable for Charlotte. It's going to be profitable for the business in Charlotte, and it's going to be good for NCGA at the same time.
Now, there is a proposed 1-cent sales tax on there to improve transportation of 40, 40, 20, 40 for rail, 40 for roads, and then 20% for buses. But I guess you are against the
Yes.
sales tax. So tell me, why are you against the sales tax, the proposed sales tax?
Yeah, it's aggressive. It's going to hurt the low wage and middle wage workers in Charlotte, particularly East Charlotte. It benefits the wealthy suburbs, not the hardworking people in East Charlotte. 9 of the stops on the red line, out of the 9 stops that are on the red line, I think there's a 10th proposed, only 3 of them are actually in Charlotte. The purpose of our transit system, since our light rail system, since it was created, was to apparently build affordable housing along those tracks. The city hasn't bought any housing along that red line for affordable housing, so they have no plans for affordable housing on it. I don't think it's the money isn't dedicated necessarily. We have that framework to utilize, the 40-40-20, but there's no clear statements or plans in terms of what that's actually going to go to. So the main reason why I oppose it is also I have an alternative transit plan that doesn't require increasing taxes. It goes again on working on government grants, public-private partnerships, like I talked about with the Carowinds extension, utilizing some of the current sales tax we already have in place, redirecting that. So I think we can achieve a lot of the same results that we are trying to achieve in this other bill without increasing taxes, without having a burdensome red line that there's questions on ridership, because we've had 60% of people go, not work from home. We can do the same things and not actually require permission from the NCGA. We can do more of what we want because we're not having to get permission from them to do that, because we can work within the framework we have now.
So you think that will be enough money? Because you're talking about public-private partnership, and this proposed sales tax would raise over the next 30 years about $20 billion.
Yeah.
So do you think your plan can raise the money needed in order to make the adjustments and the improvements in transportation?
Yes.
And how much do you think that your plan can generate?
Just working off the basic taxes that we have now. So again, and as far as public-private partnerships, it's a great segue, because my website, www.maginnisformayor.org, actually has all these plans in place. So I don't have one of these websites where it says, I'm going to do better, I'm going to do this. You go into that website, it gives you top line, you go into it more, it gives you a paragraph, and then you go further into it. It's got everything listed there. What the 1, 5, 10 year is going to be for all my plans, whether it's transit, housing, job creation, public safety, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, the funding sources, the amounts, all those things.
So your plan will have enough money in order to do the needed adjustments for transportation without raising taxes?
Yes, and the focus, and I will say this too, is even though I have an extension of my plan, that is not the priority. The priority is building infrastructure, utilizing working along that better bus expectations, building the infrastructure, making sure that we have shelters, that we have sidewalks, that we have all the infrastructure that's needed first before we even start talking some type of rail extensions or lines or whatever else. Because right now, kind of what I'm talking about is the rail lines don't really make sense because they're not going anywhere. I've always looked at public transportation to be a primary vehicle for people who don't have cars, not a secondary form of transportation for people who have cars. And right now, that's how our light rail is. When you talk about it funneling into the center of our city, those are all 6-figure jobs, 4-year degree plus type jobs. And so again, most of those people are going to have cars, or they have the ability to have cars. So it's more of a convenience to have that light rail. We need to build, again, an economic plan that's going to make sense, going to bring in job creation for those people, those longtime Charlotteans who may not have a 4-year degree. and then our transit system starts making sense, and then it becomes more profitable, and then you can start adding some of these things in.
Let's stay with transit. Yeah, as you mentioned, there was a terrible stabbing death on the train. Talk to me about your response to that, and what do you think needs to happen so that riders can feel safe on the railway?
Yeah, that is a really, really complex question. One thing, we don't have security or ticketing for this, and that's a common complaint when you go out in the community. Why aren't they checking for tickets? Why isn't there security on these trains? There's not enough ridership to warrant that. So if we can start working, instead of building a new red line out to Iredell County, why don't we again build an extension, build up the ridership on that South Blue line, and then if it becomes profitable, then it makes sense to have people there for ticketing. It makes sense to have security there, because you can actually start paying for that. Okay. There's implications to that. What's sad about it is this was the first time that our current mayor talked about a murder, or homicide as the police like call it, even though we've had 50 other ones this year. This is their first statement about that. You know, last year, 25% increase in terms of homicides. We've got a public safety issue. When you go out in public right now, people don't feel safe. If you're a voter right now and someone asks you, do you feel safer than you did 2 years or 4 years ago? I don't think anybody can say yes. So what we have to do is, again, and the problem comes down with that is, we've got an understaffed police force right now. There's about 1,600 uniformed police officers, I think including the police chief, who's probably not doing a beat, but 1,600, 1,650, I think. We've got a 300 officer deficit right now. So again, when you hear 300 officers, it doesn't mean much until you understand the context of it. That's 16, 18%. So they are pushed to the max, and they've been pushing here for a number of years to have several different resources to help them with recruiting, to get more patrol officers, and they've been denied by the city council and the mayor. And that's a problem. So you can't sit there and point fingers at a police force who isn't doing enough when they are telling you we don't have the resources. And here, let's put this. When people hear resources, they think, you know, I don't know, batons or whatever. When we say resources, I mean resources to get more physical bodies in there so there can be more physical presence, because obviously with more physical presence is going to reduce the crime.
Yeah. So with you saying that, you know, the White House has put the National Guard in Washington, D.C., and has threatened to say that maybe we can look at Baltimore, Chicago, and maybe some other cities. So since you say that it's not safe here, if you were mayor, would you allow the National Guard to come here on the streets of Charlotte to make things better?
That's a great question, Dedrick, because I was actually getting into that. That's why I feel that the mayor's response was more than inadequate. She talked about the victim once, then talked about kind of mental health, and then never showed out a clear plan for how she's going to address that. When the President of the United States is looking for excuses to put National Guard on the streets, a high-profile murder like this is something that is going to give him the excuse to do that. You know, Elon Musk tweeted about this. He tweeted about this to Spencer Merriweather, our DA, what's going on with this. So this is not just a Charlotte thing that's just in our little bubble. This is a national thing. And so when we sit there, I actually had it kind of was a little bit weird. I had a person come to my website, put a message in there a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, that asked me that same question when the National Guard went into DC. What can we do? What can you do as mayor to do this? And she wasn't asking that as I've asked everybody else. This was, I think you're the one to answer that, which I thought was a little odd. Why, as me, as a candidate for mayor, is having to sit there and assuage a person with all these concerns? And part of the reason is because the mayor, you can't reach the mayor. She's got a campaign going on, no campaign website, no way people can sit there and reach her to ask these questions that they're concerned about. And so I had to sit there and tell her, well, it's a little bit different with DC because it's a federal jurisdiction versus ours. But just you're talking about Baltimore, Chicago, it could be that way. And so again, I think it's important to understand is if those things happen, do you want, as a citizen of Charlotte, a former Marine in that mayor's office to push back on there, or someone who, again, you know, is more comfortable going to parties than being out with the people?
So would you agree? Would you allow National Guard to come here in Charlotte? and help with things, since you said that there's a 600 officers short? So would you allow 300? Would you allow the National Guard to come to Charlotte?
No, I wouldn't.
Why
I
not?
don't think the level. There's a difference between perception and reality, and I think that's what's going on with the White House right now. Is they're elevating perception that there's that risk versus being the reality of it. Don't get me wrong. Again, Charlotte has gotten more dangerous over the last couple of years, but I think it is still solvable. And one of the things when we talk about police officers and giving them the resources, it's not just about putting more cops on the street. It's getting help for them in the community as well. So in my plan, we have something, it's a violence interruption program that's based out of Albuquerque, where it's a pilot program. We're going to find 50 people in the community who are going to be able to step in, know the people in the community, and be able to if there's going to be an altercation they feel is going to be violent, step in and ease the tensions. You know, one of my people I met on a campaign a while back was Curtis Hayes Jr. Got a lot of publicity when we talked about the Rodney Keith Scott murder, and that's why he stepped in there and he de-escalated, and the cops were in there, and that's something that's good.
Keith Lamont Scott.
I'm sorry, Keith Lamont Scott. Excuse me. Then there's also where we have a program where it's again people in the community who can go to non-violent calls for police. So if there's somebody complaining about the noise of the next neighbor, the police don't need to go to that. You have somebody in the community that goes over there. Hey, you know me, we're friends. Keep it down. You got a complaint over here. We don't want to have to call the cops. Things like that. And what that program has done, that's based on another program from I think it's Philadelphia. It allows. It's shown that it has a 15% decrease in response time by police to actual violent effects. So there's a way to tackle this in many different ways, looking outside the city. I had a council member. They had a post, and they kind of alluded to the fact that we don't need ideas from outside the city. We can solve all our problems in Charlotte because we know the people in Charlotte and those are the problems. But I think that's not a way to look at things. You got to look at outside city and see what else is working otherwise, and bring those into Charlotte and help the police in that way by giving them those. The buzzword and everything is wraparound services. When we talk about mental health or homelessness, it's the same thing with police force and public safety. We need to have those wraparound things so that the police can respond to violence quicker, easier, and not be taxed or burdened by dealing with other things.
Do you think Charlotte City Council is dysfunctional? And if you think it is, then what would you do? What type of leader would you be in order to make it more functional?
It is dysfunctional. I mean, we know that. It's been dysfunctional 2 years.
And what's your evidence of that?
I think dysfunction is based upon perception. And there's been multiple articles, Observer, whatever else, talking about that. A form of dysfunction is not attendance. We just had a Charlotte Observer, a news article that showed the attendance in the last 8 years. Attendance has drastically decreased by the Charlotte Council. I see that as a sign of a lack of leadership. Okay, the mayor herself was the fourth worst person in terms of attendance. It was noted that in almost every meeting that she was in, almost every meeting she was in, she left early. She's trying to say that she's delegating authority for absences, but this is a tough subject. Okay, this is a tough subject. We just went through the Biden situation last election cycle, and I think we're dealing with our Charlotte version of that. I think it's a unspoken secret or unspoken around Charlotte within some of the media and within the party and the elected officials itself, that the mayor has declined over the last couple of years. And I think that leadership part of that is a lack of leadership. She's not showing up to events. She's not showing up to meetings. She's leaving meetings earlier. She's putting out statements like she did that, again, doesn't really say any plan. She showed up, as far as in this campaign, only a 30-day cycle. So we're not talking about a multiple month cycle here as far as campaigning, 30 days almost. She showed up for the first day of forums, 2 on that first same day, and then she's only shown up to 1 since. She declined the redress movement to talk about the transit. She declined the Charlotte Ledger, and in both cases they just canceled it because the media doesn't want to cover a forum if the mayor isn't and the incumbent isn't there. And then the only other one she's attended was the WFAE, where she got what I think very easy questions to ask when we talk about the airline employees and the Bank of America upgrades, which again, all questions are important, so I'm not saying that they aren't important questions, but they're easy questions. So there's definitely dysfunction going on. I think it comes down to a little bit of decline whether it's energy, whatever else. I think that's what's going on. I think that's a problem. It's leading to a lack of leadership. I think leading to a lack of dysfunction. And she didn't comment on this article, but there was an article a couple weeks ago that some of her proponents, former council members, said, well, the problem is the current council members because they're bomb throwers. What type of leadership is that when you're going to blame the people that you work with for the problem rather than saying the buck stops here, I need to do something about it? Yeah. She tried to run another person against one of her own council members last election cycle. How do you build trust with somebody if you are funding their opponent and now you got to work with them? We all got people that we work with that we don't like.
Yeah.
You know?
So I hear what you're saying, but then on the flip side is city council and the mayor, the current city council and mayor, are they getting the job done?
I would say no.
No. And what part of the job are they not getting done?
In almost every regard, they're not. When we talk about what you hear is with the mayor, she talks a lot about when she goes out to the few forums she's gone to, talks about what she's accomplished, but she never attaches any numbers to it. If you know me, I say one of my mottos is if there's a problem, I've got a plan for it. And again, that goes back to my website where the whole plan is there. You know, you don't have to guess what I'm thinking. This is it. She talks about what she's done, and she'll use vague terms like, we've created jobs without degrees, or we've done affordable housing, but you never understand what the numbers are, and you don't know what those numbers are relative to something. We've got a 36,000 affordable housing deficit here in Charlotte. We've heard about affordable housing for 20 plus years, 36,000. Okay, to understand what that means is we've had the Housing Trust Fund for the past 20 years, which is the main driver of affordable housing, 11,000 houses. Former council member Bakari said, we're just treading water, and everybody kind of ignored him because he's a Republican or else. We were treading water. When you talk about the definition of affordable housing, it means paying 30% or less of your income as far as housing. That's on the city website. It's not something I made up. Over 48% of Charlotteans are cost burdened when it comes to housing, which means they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing. When you have a situation where almost 50% of your residents in a city are having an issue with something, that's not an issue, that's a systemic epidemic. And we're not hearing that. You don't hear that from the mayor. You're not hearing that from the city council. Yeah, we have an affordable housing crisis. This is the problem, and this is how we're going to reach it. Now, I have an affordable housing plan, and again, I would love to sit there and tell you right now that I can solve that 36,000, but I can't. It is that deep. My plan, 25,900 houses over the next 10 years to bridge that gap significantly, but that is a significant gap that we're not hearing about. And again, you look at things like job creation. We've got 95,000 unemployed or underemployed people here in Charlotte. There is some untapped talent out here that doesn't have the job. And again, that goes down to the fact that we bring in all these headquarters, all these big companies, 250 jobs, 165,000, which again means they're going to bring in 200 people from outside the city to raise up housing prices because they got high incomes. Yeah. We don't have an economy for the people who have lived here for a long time, particularly those who don't have a 4-year degree. And it's ridiculous. We've had banking for 40 years and we've always been looking for that next thing. And now we're looking at health tech. Let's put in some industry. So I've got a plan between my housing, transit, public safety, transparency, 64,000 jobs over the next 10 years, 80% don't require a college degree.
So we're going to wrap this up. If elected, tell me real quick, what's your big idea? What's something that you want to do that has not been done? What's your big idea?
It's really everything, quite honestly. Again, we talked about pedestrianizing. Okay. We talked about different types of housing. We talked about some of the transit again as far as the blue line. Okay. So we've kind of hit on all those things. What I do actually though, before I think about child care. Child care is something part of my platform that the city is not dealing with right now. Okay. When we talk about trying to make Charlotte affordable, child care, $10,000 to $15,000 per child for child care. That is something that we can tackle that we're not doing right now. There's a program in Michigan called TriShare. I bring it here as Charlotte TriShare. How it works is the company pays a third, the city pays a third, the employee pays a third. And what they can do is again put someone who's making, a single parent who's making $35,000, that's putting $4,000 back in their pocket. That is life-changing. When we talk about affordable housing, we're always talking about ways to reduce expenses. You put more money in people's hands, things become a lot more affordable. Crime goes down because you don't have all these crimes of desperation. Transit makes more sense. All these things are all interconnected economically, and we're trying to look at them as these separate pieces. If you put a comprehensive plan together, I'm a financial advisor. What I would do is I would look at the goal. What do you want to achieve? People think of financial advisors just about investments. Our first meeting would always be with a prospective client was, what are you trying to achieve? Let's talk about it. You tell me your goals, your fears, and your concerns.
Gotcha.
And that's what I do with every constituent when I go out there. I say, what is the problem? You tell me. I want to hear from you. What is it? I don't want to read about it. You tell me. And that's what you do. You figure out what the end goal is. You figure out what you need to get there. And then you start showing progress and keeping track of that. That's how you do that. That's how you create transparency. The Charlotte checkbook is what I call, based off of New York City, where it's a real time where you can see all the money, where all the money is going in terms of Charlotte budget. Is it going to minority businesses? Is it going to women-owned businesses? Are these people employing people in Charlotte? Because there's no way to track that right now if they're actually employing people in Charlotte. We're giving them money and we're not tracking where they can do it in Charlotte.
Well,
So
thank you.
Charlotte Accountability Commission. So there's several ways. Go to my website. I talk about, outline all the transparency and how we can make sure that Charlotte is working for the community, not for the people with the money. So
Gotcha.
what I like to think is, just say as last thing is, I'm running on basically, I hope it doesn't say cliche, but it is hope. You know, I think there's a lot of apathy in the community right now, particularly the underserved communities. They don't feel the city council is listening to them, and they don't feel that the organizations that are supposed to be speaking for them actually represent them either. And so what I want to do is I want to be hope for them, that I'm able to listen to them, talk with the other communities that have maybe prospered more, and put some solutions in place. So really it's about bringing hope home.
Thank you so much, Brendan Maginnis. Hey, listen, if you have to vote, September 9th is the primary, and you can early vote until September 6th. All right? Thank you, Mr. Maginnis, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank